There's a moment, silent, sudden, when everything changes. Not because you said anything, but because you saw something. The charm fades. The smiles feel rehearsed. And for the first time you realize, they weren't kind. They were calculated. But here's what's more unsettling. They realize you know. You didn't call them out. You didn't make a scene. But the way you look at them now, it's different. And that shift, it terrifies them. This video is about that moment and what bad people do when their mask slips. And they know you've seen behind it. When someone toxic knows you've seen behind their act, they don't disappear. They adapt. The performance doesn't end. It changes scenes. You'll witness charm turn cold, concern turn calculated. It's not about repairing the bond. It's about regaining control. This video reveals 6 psychological tactics bad people use when they know you know, and how to respond not with rage, but with stoic strength, clarity, and peace that can't be shaken. Let's begin. 1. They flip the narrative. When someone toxic knows you've seen behind their act, they rarely admit it. Instead, they do something far more calculated. They flip the narrative. Suddenly, you're not the one who saw the truth. You're the one who misjudged. You're too emotional, too sensitive, or imagining things. It's no longer about what they did. It becomes about how you reacted. You're cast not as the one who saw clearly, but the one who's overreacting. This is not a misunderstanding. It's a strategy. Because if they can twist the story fast enough, they don't have to deal with being seen. They just have to make sure you get questioned before they do. They don't need to prove they're right. They just need to plant doubt about whether you are. Why does this work? Because good people hesitate. We want to be fair. We want to understand. We replay events in our minds, asking ourselves, did I go too far? Maybe I was too harsh. And that's exactly the window they exploit. They don't argue with facts. They attack perception. They use your self-awareness against you. And it's powerful because when you're the kind of person who values truth, you're also the kind of person who second-guesses your own instincts. That's the paradox. The more honest you are, the more vulnerable you become to someone who isn't. So what do? The Stoic doesn't fight for the story. The Stoic lives the truth. Marcus Aurelius said, if someone can show me my mistake, I'll gladly change. But if not, I keep walking my path. That's it. No emotional courtroom, no rebuttals, no chasing validation. Because here's the hard truth. You will never win a debate with someone who's committed to distortion. And you don't need to. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them spin the story into whatever shape they need to feel powerful again. Your power isn't in the counter-argument. It's in your consistency, your stillness, your refusal to abandon your integrity just to prove a point. Let them say you're dramatic. Let them say you're overthinking. Let them say whatever makes them feel safe. You're not here to manage their illusions. You're here to live without one. And yes, being misunderstood hurts. Being cast as the problem when all you did was see clearly stings. But pain is not a sign that something's wrong. Pain is a sign that something matters. And when something matters, you protect it. Not with fury, but with focus. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to stop betraying what you already know. This is the first mask they wear. When this tactic doesn't work, when their spin loses traction, they shift again. Sometimes, instead of attacking, they smile and pretend nothing ever happened. That's what we'll explore next. 2, they pretend nothing happened. Sometimes when their narrative flipping fails, when you don't react, don't argue, don't break, they try something even stranger. They pretend nothing ever happened. No apology, no ownership. Not even a nod to the tension that's still humming in the air. Instead, you get a casual, hey, smiley face, a friendly comment on your post, a random meme in your inbox like everything's back to normal. But this isn't awkwardness. It's not denial. It's a strategy. This is their attempt to reset the scene without ever acknowledging the damage. Because if they can act like nothing happened, maybe you'll doubt whether anything truly did. It's psychological gaslighting dressed in politeness. And it works because, again, you're a decent person. You crave peace. You value connection. You're uncomfortable with tension lingering too long. So part of you hesitates. You wonder if responding is just being mature. You think, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe it's better to just move on. But that's exactly the pressure they're counting on. Your empathy, your social grace, your desire to resolve. They use familiarity as a weapon. They try to disarm you with ease, as if smiling kindly makes the past disappear. But here's the Stoic truth. Peace built on pretending is not peace at all. It's performance. And a performance that protects their comfort at the cost of your clarity. It isn't kindness, it's manipulation. You don't have to reply. You don't have to meet polite with polite. You're not rude for remembering what they refuse to acknowledge. Stoicism teaches us that we are not obligated to maintain false harmony. Seneca wrote, "If someone cannot endure the truth, then perhaps they cannot deserve your presence in it." That doesn't mean you shut the door with rage, but it does mean you don't open it with amnesia. Yes, forgiveness is noble, but forgiveness is not the same as re-entry. It's not a return to what was. It's a release from carrying resentment, but not a requirement to rebuild trust. You can wish someone well and still keep your distance. You can be kind without being available. You can be grounded and gracious without playing along. So when they show up smiling like nothing happened, watch, don't react. Discern, don't rush. Ask yourself, are they here to reconnect or to see if your guard has lowered? And if you sense the answer, trust it. Because people don't always return for resolution. Sometimes they return to reestablish access. Not because they've changed, but because they hope you did. If you hold your ground, quietly, calmly, without guilt, you pass the test they didn't know they were giving. But beware, if silence and civility don't let them back in, they often take a darker turn. They stop being polite and start working behind the scenes. That's what we'll uncover next. 3. They undermine you quietly. When pretending doesn't work, when you don't bite the bait of friendliness, when your silence remains solid, they take a different route. They stop trying to charm you. They start trying to undermine you, but not directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, they move behind closed doors into whispers, innuendos, and carefully placed concerns. It starts with soft sabotage. I'm just worried about them. They've been acting strange lately. I don't know, something just feels off with them these days. On the surface, it sounds like care. In reality, it's a calculated distortion. They're not warning others to help you. They're preloading doubt before the truth has a chance to breathe. This tactic is especially dangerous because you often don't know it's happening until the damage is done. You just start feeling something off. People seem more distant. Opportunities dry up. Friends become neutral, cold, or even suspicious. And then it hits you. You're being quietly erased. This kind of manipulation doesn't burn bridges. It erodes them, slowly, subtly from the shadows. And when you realize it, the urge to respond can be overwhelming. You want to defend yourself, explain everything, clear your name. You want to shout, "That's not who I am." But here's the trap. The moment you step into their battlefield, you've already lost. Why? Because now you're reacting. You're playing a game you never agreed to. You're chasing a story they wrote. On their terms, not yours. So what do? You do what the Stoics taught. You rise above, not with arrogance, but with alignment. Seneca once wrote, "The true mark of a great mind is to rise above insults, not out of weakness, but wisdom." Let others talk. Let the gossip echo. Let the false stories circulate. But while they distort your image in secret, you reinforce your truth in public. Not through rebuttal, but through consistency, through clarity, through character. Live in a way that contradicts the lie. Walk in a way that makes falsehood exhausting to sustain. This isn't passive, it's powerful. It's choosing to let time reveal what words never could. Yes, you may lose people along the way. Those too quick to judge, too easily swayed by drama. But the ones who remain, they're not fooled. They're forged, just like you. Through observation, not assumption. And those are the people worth keeping. Remember, you are not responsible for dismantling every lie told in your absence. You are responsible for being so honest in your presence that no lie can live long in its shadow. And if they realize even their sabotage can't pull you back, they shift again. This time to something far more deceptive. Not destruction, but imitation. They won't fight you. They'll become you, or at least what they think will win you back. Let's explore that next. 4, they fake change. When charm fails and sabotage doesn't work, when your silence remains unshaken and your integrity holds, they reach for their most deceptive tool, yet they perform change. Not real transformation, not slow, humbling self-awareness, but a rehearsed imitation of growth, designed to win you back. Suddenly, they're kinder, more self-reflective. They start saying things like, "I've done a lot of thinking. I realize now I wasn't fair to you. I'm working on myself." And maybe for a moment, you want to believe them. Because let's be honest, you've likely wished for this version of them all along. A version that finally sees you, respects your boundaries, owns their behavior. But here's where Stoic clarity must rise above emotional hope. Real change is rarely this polished, and it never arrives with a pitch. Authentic transformation is awkward. It's slow. It shows up not in grand gesture, but in quiet repetition, when no one's watching. What manipulators often do is mimicking the language of growth, but not the work of it. They mirror your words back to you. They echo your boundaries. They use your voice to gain back your trust. But what they're doing isn't evolving. It's recalibrating. They're not becoming better. They're becoming better at getting close again. Because if guilt didn't work, maybe remorse will. If distance didn't shake you, maybe vulnerability will. They don't want healing. They want access. Access to your time, your emotions, your presence, without earning it. So how do you respond? With watchfulness, not weakness. With discernment, not drama. You stay kind, but not available. You stay open, but not unguarded. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." You don't punish, you observe. Real change doesn't beg for entry. It quietly waits for trust to return without pushing. And most of all, real change never asks you to forget the past. It simply proves over time that it's not repeating it. I once watched a close friend fall into this trap. After months of manipulation, she finally cut contact. And within weeks, he reappeared. Soft-spoken, supportive, mirroring the very words she had said during their fights. For a short while, she believed it. She wanted to believe it. She let him back in. But slowly, the patterns returned. The subtle criticisms, the pushing of boundaries. The charm was a costume, just long enough to get through the door. She wasn't welcomed. She was baited. That's what makes false change so dangerous. It doesn't look like harm. It looks like hope. And that's why Stoicism tells us, observe behavior, not intention, not tone, not promises. Let time test the truth. And even if change is real, you are still not obligated to rebuild what was broken. Forgiveness is release, not an invitation. But if they see even this won't work, they'll shift again. This time, not with charm or remorse, but with subtle pressure. They'll start tapping gently on the edges of your boundaries and looking for cracks. We'll explore that next. 5, they push boundaries softly. When apology doesn't open the door and performance doesn't earn your trust, they don't walk away. They wait, and then, ever so gently, they begin to tap on your boundaries. Not forcefully, but softly, subtle, familiar, almost innocent. You might get a vague message. Just thinking about you, or a random heart on an old photo, or maybe a mutual friend says, they asked about you, said they miss your energy. It doesn't seem threatening. That's the point. Because they've learned something. If they can't kick down the door, they'll test to see if it's unlocked. They're not reconnecting. They're reconning, measuring, studying, looking for signs of weakness disguised as warmth. If you respond, even lightly, they take it as permission. If you explain, they treat it as negotiation. If you ignore them, they increase the frequency, just enough to stay beneath the radar. This is when most people break, not because the manipulator is powerful, but because the pressure is quiet, and quiet pressure doesn't startle you. It wears you down, especially if you're kind, especially if you're empathetic, especially if you hate being rude or cold. That's what makes this tactic so effective. It doesn't challenge your strength. It challenges your compassion. It asks you to make small exceptions, tiny breaches in the boundary. You worked so hard to build, and little by little, those cracks become doors again. But here's what the Stoic knows. Boundaries aren't lines you draw once. They're limits you live again and again. Epictetus taught that the only thing truly in our control is how we respond. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to justify your distance. You don't need to make anyone else feel better about a truth they refuse to face. Your peace is not rude, it's protective. And sometimes the strongest answer is no answer at all. I watched someone I care about, Jordan, go through this. She had finally stepped away from a toxic dynamic. No big confrontation, just clarity, then distance. Weeks later it began. A message, a joke, a comment on a group chat. Each one carefully timed, each one designed to see if she'd lower her guard. Not violently, but gently. Familiarity weaponized. And it almost worked. Not because she forgot the pain, but because she didn't want to seem cold. That's the danger. Not forgetting. Forgiving at the cost of your clarity. But Jordan didn't respond. And over time, those small taps faded. Because a door that doesn't open eventually gets abandoned. The Stoic path is not about cruelty. It's about unshakable clarity, a kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. And when even these soft boundary pushes don't work, when they realize access has truly been denied, they don't just retreat, they retaliate, but not at you, at how others see you. That's what we'll face next. 6. They discredit you to others. When access is denied, when charm, guilt, silence, and soft pressure all fail, they don't just give up, they change targets. Now the focus shifts away from you and turns toward your reputation. If they can't get back in, they'll try to make sure no one else follows you out. They don't attack you directly. They don't post angry rants. They don't scream in public. They work in shadows, carefully, strategically, and most importantly, plausibly. They whisper, "I'm honestly worried about them." They haven't been the same lately. They've been pushing people away. On the surface, it sounds like concern, but underneath it's corrosion. They're planting subtle doubts, not strong enough to sound bitter, but just enough to make people second-guess you. This is reputation warfare done quietly. Not with fire, but with fog. And it's terrifyingly effective, because you don't see it right away. You just start feeling unseen. People become distant. Group chats go silent. You're excluded from events you used to be invited to. Your name fades from the spaces it used to belong. At first, you wonder if you're imagining it. You question yourself, did I do something wrong? Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I'm just pulling away. But then it clicks. You're not pulling away. You're being pushed out, gently but deliberately. This tactic isn't about destroying your life. It's about isolating you just enough to make you vulnerable again. Loneliness becomes leverage. Silence becomes shame. And once again, you feel the urge to fight back, to explain, to correct every false impression, to grab every misunderstanding and shake it until it turns back into truth. But here's where Stoicism offers its deepest lesson yet. Your job is not to control what others believe. It's to live in such a way that lies cannot stand for long. Marcus Aurelius said, "The only thing worth clinging to is to live rightly and truthfully and be patient with those who do not." That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's strength so deep it doesn't need applause. The Stoic doesn't campaign for their reputation. They cultivate their presence. They don't chase narrative. They embody truth through repeated, unshakable action. So what do? You don't defend. You demonstrate. You show up, calm, consistent, clear. You let your daily character outshine their whispered doubts, because real people, wise people, don't rely on rumors. They rely on what they observe over time. And yes, you may lose some along the way. People who were quick to believe the easy story. People who preferred comfort over clarity. Let them go. The people who matter won't be tricked by silence and suggestion. They'll recognize manipulation not by what was said, but by what was never aligned with how you've always lived. And those who never saw you clearly to begin with, they were never yours to lose. This is the quiet power of Stoicism, not the urge to control, but the discipline to remain clear when you're being blurred. Not the need to win the room, but the strength to walk out of it with your integrity intact. You are not the echo of their narrative. You are the evidence that contradicts it. So when they try to discredit you, don't panic, don't chase, don't explain yourself to noise. Stand still, because if their story requires shadows, your clarity will always threaten them. And when all their efforts collapse, when every manipulation fails, you'll be standing right where you were from the beginning. Steady, unshaken, true. So now you've seen the pattern, the full playbook. How bad people adapt once the mask slips. Once they know that you know. First, they flip the narrative. Then they pretend nothing happened. When that fails, they undermine you in whispers. If that doesn't work, they perform change. If you hold your ground, they push boundaries softly. And when all else fails, they discredit you to others. It's not random. It's not emotional chaos. It's strategic survival. For them, because when you stop being easy to manipulate, you become something dangerous. You become clear. And clarity is rebellion in a world built on performance. But here's the question that matters most now. How do you survive this? How do you keep your soul intact, your peace preserved, your mind steady, when everything around you is designed to distort your reality? This is where Stoicism reveals its full power. Not as a theory, not as a quote, but as a way of walking through the fire without letting it burn away who you are. See, the Stoics never taught us to suppress emotion. They taught us to master response. They didn't teach avoidance. They taught presence under pressure. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal at the highest levels of Roman power. He watched men smile at him by day and plot against him by night. And what did he write? If someone does wrong, the harm is theirs. My job is to remain as I should, calm, patient, truthful, just. That's it. No revenge, no drama, no smear campaign in return, just a disciplined return to self. The Stoic doesn't fight shadows. They stand so still, the lies reveal themselves. They don't try to prove their worth. They simply live in a way that makes falsehood impossible to sustain. And when the world becomes confusing, when manipulation clouds your vision, when even your own instincts feel uncertain, the Stoic doesn't look outward for validation. They look inward for alignment. They ask, is this in line with my principles? Am I reacting or responding? Am I showing up as who I promised myself I would be? Because reputation is never fully in your control. But character? Character is your daily signature. And clarity is your daily freedom. You don't need to chase the truth. You just need to walk in it long enough for the noise to die on its own. And it will, because performance has limits. But presence outlasts everything. Let them tell their story. Let them gather listeners. Let them twist what happened. You are not their fiction. You are not their regret. You are not their enemy. You are simply no longer available for their game. And when you let go of needing to be understood, you gain something far greater: peace that can't be manipulated, power that doesn't need to be loud, freedom that doesn't require permission. That's what Stoicism gives you. Not the illusion of strength, but the daily decision to stay unshaken in the face of chaos. And if you've made it this far, you've already taken the hardest step. You stopped being fooled. You started being awake. And now the work begins. To stay awake, to stay anchored, to choose clarity again and again, even when confusion feels easier. That's the real victory. And that brings us to the final message. Let's close together. So let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone shift the moment they realized you weren't blind to them anymore? Maybe they got sweeter, or colder, or quieter in public but louder behind your back. Maybe they started testing the edges of your silence, or smiling at you like nothing ever happened. If any of that felt familiar today, you're not overreacting. You're not imagining things. You're not being too much. You're just finally seeing clearly. And that clarity is costly, because once you stop being easy to manipulate, you stop being easy to love for the wrong people. But let this be your reminder. That is not your loss. That is your return to self-respect, to inner stillness, to truth. If something in this video spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's trying to find the words for what they're going through. Send it to the friend who keeps questioning their own sanity. Post it for the person you once were, the one who needed this kind of voice, but didn't have it yet. And if you'd like more of this kind of strength, quiet, grounded, ancient, yet practical, then subscribe to Stoic Viva. Every week we take the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and apply it to modern struggles, so you can stay clear when life gets chaotic, stay calm when others get loud, and stay true when everything around you asks you to abandon yourself. Because this isn't just philosophy. This is your power, remembered, restored, and reclaimed. So take a breath, drop a comment, tell your truth, help someone else feel less alone. And no matter what you're facing, stay sharp, stay steady, stay unshakable. We'll see you next time.